We can figure out exactly what happens to Shroud before it even happens just by paying attention to irony.
Well, I'm wet.
Now, when I say irony, I'm not talking about subversion of expectations. We expect this to be a typical redemption story of former villains trying to be heroes, and that's what we get. But this patch is in fact trying to do the opposite. The characters in the show actually rise to meet our expectations, whether those are good or bad. If we believe that they are villains and that the Z team will never actually become heroes, that's exactly what they'll become. Every decision we make can start to push them in a certain direction, and by the end of the game, we are forced to face the consequences of those actions. Now, when I'm talking irony, I'm talking mainly situational and a bit of cosmic irony here. Some basic examples are the powers that people are born with. Robert and Blazer aren't actually born with any powers, and that causes its own set of insecurities, but those who do have powers have a noticeably unhealthy relationship to them. Invisigal can turn invisible, but she wants to be seen by the people around her. Punch-Up gains super strength and durability, but his entire body has to be condensed down so he can accomplish this. Chase's power allows him to move 50 times faster than the average person, but his absolute time is not slowed down, so he actually ages 50 times faster as well. All of these are examples of how it's more about the person you are and what you do with those abilities, not the powers themselves. Some smaller instances that we know of, Invisigal actually still smokes despite having asthma, which we know is a terrible idea. In this case though, it actually represents a more self-destructive kind of irony, where she's kind of given up on becoming a better person and she's still doing things that she knows are bad for her, kind of in a way to rebel against the fact that she doesn't have any expectations of positive things being put on her. And so she does exactly the sort of thing that you would expect from someone who is trying to rebel against people who have no expectations. Do things that are even worse for yourself. Characters also refuse to go on missions if you slight them or cut their friends, like Malevola and Punch-Up if you cut Cooper and Sonar, and even Golem if you kick him out of the conference room. But let's go back to Shroud. So the reason that Shroud, aka Elliot Connors, is a fitting villain in the story is because we know that Shroud is arrogant as heck. Shroud's ability is to compute the probability of future events. Almost like having a supercomputer for a brain, he quickly sees which paths are possible and can extend this to any calculated event he's able to think of. The irony of this situation, however, is that it leads him to crave even more computational power, and he starts to augment his own abilities in hopes of knowing the future rather than just almost knowing it. He has a bit of a god complex. Yeah, and he needs the Astral Pulse to fully complete his augmentations, as he currently doesn't appear to have enough power to foresee the future as he wants to. In pursuit of this goal, he forms the Red Ring to take control of as many villains as he can and remake the world into one where he can be its leader. Now, the story didn't go into this that much, but one line that makes me believe he's not quite as evil and a little bit more psychopathic and a pathological liar is that he truly does believe that he will create a better world for everyone if he gets this power.
You think you can beat the bad by being good, but there's no solving human nature. You can't stop evil. All you can do is control it.
From the comics, we know he originally wanted to be a hero for the Brave Brigade, but he took it too far, and Astral, the second Mecha Man, actually ended up preventing him from joining the Brave Brigade. And because of this, they got into a fight, Shroud ends up killing him, and goes to jail for about 15 years. The philosophy he has on villains is in direct opposition to what Z-Team is trying to accomplish through the Phoenix program, which is by trying to prove that everyone has a chance so long as they want that for themselves. Shroud is trying to show that these are not people who can be saved, and that these are only people who can be controlled. This is a struggle that is directly a mirror to famous historical debates on whether humans are inherently selfish or inherently good. Thomas Hobbes famously argued in The Leviathan that people were born wicked and we needed checks and balances in place to prevent humanity from destroying themselves. This philosophy could be applied to Shroud's version of seeing the world, where once a villain has been created, there's no coming back, and it's up to the heroes to forcefully keep those people in check. On the other hand, there are arguments against evil being inevitable for these people. My favorite philosopher around this topic is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who stated that humans are born naturally good, but are corrupted by society, leading to that goodness being extinguished as we get older. Somewhat similarly, John Locke takes a more neutral approach and believes that all people were born as a blank slate, if you've heard of tabula rasa, and that the environment they grew up in and society as a whole were responsible for shaping those individuals. He adds that it was then our responsibility as a society to help form morally good people to the best of our abilities. Take Vizzy, for example. While we don't know everything about her childhood, we're given hints that she's not exactly growing up in a good role model environment, and she's probably been surrounded by villains her entire life. And this, in combination with her cynicism around her powers, really causes her to fall into villainy, because no matter what her personal desires were at the time, her environment shaped her to become a villain, and she had no control over that. From Shroud's perspective, people like Vizzy are beyond saving, cannot change, and need to be stopped by force to prevent them from doing anything villainous. Now let's compare Shroud directly to Robert. While Robert originally isn't entirely confident that the program will work, he still remains optimistic when it comes to Vizzy and the rest of the team because he believes that everyone has a shot and that the whole point of the Phoenix program is to rehabilitate villains like her. He does his best to support them on their journey, and he even tries to work with them not as a hero, but as their leader, supervillain leader, you could call it. He understands how hard it must have been for those that had the exact opposite expectations thrust onto them of being villains, instead of what he went through, which was an expectation of becoming a hero, since he was born to a legacy of Mecha Man heroes. He then does his best to try to offset these expectations and give them a reason to believe that they can in fact become heroes instead. Unlike in other stories where the villain is often a parallel or a foil to the main character, this philosophy is how we contrast Robert from our main antagonist Shroud. If you watched my previous video, you know that Dispatch doesn't do this because it presents two different foil and parallel characters for Robert in Blazer and Invisigal. Shroud represents a clash of ideologies instead for Robert, and most likely, if there were to be any foil or parallel comparisons for Shroud, that would have been with Robert's dad, Mecha Man 2, instead of Robert. We don't really get to see this in our story, but I'm sure if we were to see some prequel or some more background information about the two, that's the route that they would go, most likely. Another thing to note is that someone with Shroud's ability could have gone either way for Irony to apply to his powers. In a more positive direction, he could have been just a very paranoid person who was very fearful of things going wrong. If you've ever heard of Murphy's Law, he could have been very afraid of things always going wrong because he'd always know there's a 2% chance of things going terrible or a 5% chance that he falls off this ledge and dies, right? And I can see that being a valid way to portray his power in a more scared and frightful way. He could have also been a very pessimistic character and have always expected things to fail despite having a vast majority in his favor during his missions. On the negative end, which is what we actually get, Shroud became very jaded and he became completely unable to be happy unless he was 100% sure that he knew what was going to happen and that he could control the outcomes that he was seeing. He became fearful instead of the possibility that he wouldn't be able to predict what was going on and has sought to increase this ability so he could become omnipotent and essentially predict the future so he wouldn't have to worry about those things anymore. So by the end, how should Irony come to be the downfall of Shroud? Well, obviously by having something unpredictable happen. In our case, several unpredictable things happened. Blazer gave Chase her amulet. The Z-Team succeeded at becoming a competent crime-fighting superhero group. And most of all, we helped Vizzy break free from her past and become a true hero at the end of it. Personal opinion, don't yell at me. I think the good ending is the canon ending in most of these stories, and so you're free to your own opinions, but that's what I'm going with. We knew from the beginning that we were fighting an uphill battle taking on this new job, and yet Shroud could not see past all the probabilities that we would fail and that these things wouldn't happen to know that people do change and that things can be different from the most likely expected outcome. The cosmic irony of all this is that Shroud is chasing a goal that actually won't make him happy even if he achieves this. Many of us, like Shroud, may believe that if we only had that one thing, we could be happy and it would solve all of our problems. Something like a new job or a new relationship or a new car or anything like that. Shroud in this case wants more agency over his choices, his own future. But the irony of that is that we all already have this power innately. By chasing more power and the ability to see all his possibilities, Shroud is stripping himself of the ability to make any real choices and actually create the kind of future he wants, no matter the decision he made at the time. Just because something is less likely doesn't mean it can't still happen if you just believe in yourself and work for it and do the best that you can in those circumstances where, even if it wasn't the highest probability outcome, you can still create a future that leads to that in the end. By only going off of what's most likely, he's ignoring the fact that he's not in control of the rest of the world's choices and actions, and while he can see things related to him and how other people will react, he's not in charge of how the world works and how everyone's paths will cross, and even if that were to be the case, there's still a chance that any improbable outcome could still happen under the right circumstances, since nothing is impossible. Choices and mistakes are what make us human, and learning from those mistakes and becoming better is what allows us to grow and stop making those mistakes in the future. Without this, what's the point of making choices at all if we're not going to use that to improve and become better? Tied into this on a meta level, one last bit of irony here is that we're making decisions like this in a decision-making game where choices matter. Would we have any fun playing the game if we knew exactly what probability of different things happening would be if we chose different choices? Would we care if we knew which choices mattered and which ones didn't? I would think that that's a pretty boring game, right? We're even presenting this in the main gameplay loop where we're giving a percentage chance to either succeed or fail a roll, and it's not guaranteed based on our ability to cover the correct characteristic of the mission at hand. Some thoughts on plot changes for the ending that could have really cemented these concepts. I think there could have been a wild opportunity for Ad Hoc to include a route where if Robert fails enough, he actually ends up joining Shroud instead. In this case, he becomes so discouraged that he believes that the only way to save villains is to prevent them from doing any more harm in the world, because he already tried to rehabilitate them and he failed. It also would have made sense on this route if we had chosen to kill Shroud, that we were not actually given a hero but mixed ending, and instead we would maybe become the next Shroud or take up the mantle, because what we worked for originally was to keep people from doing villainous things by showing them that they can be good. And because Robert started from the opposite direction, what if we showed how Robert, a good person, could have been corrupted along the way and became a villain because he was so concerned with getting revenge? I think that might have changed the tone of his character arc if we did go in that direction towards revenge rather than redemption. And those are two different things, but I think they could have worked in tandem to kind of show how both a good person can become evil and an evil person could become good. Instead, of course, we got the more Vizzy-focused ending where we saw the consequences of our actions in the people that we failed to save, rather than have those actions be consequences on our own character at the end. I still think Shroud Robert would have been pretty crazy though. Anyways, I hope you now have a better idea of how irony and probability are the bones of this game, and how the creators really honed in on these themes to give us the message that they were going for. I think we can all appreciate this aspect of the game, and this is just one reason why the game is so dang good. Thank you all for watching, and keep an eye out for more.